Hello beautiful people, welcome to Remi's Fashion. My name is Remi. Thank you so much for 33,000 plus subscribers. I really appreciate every single one of you. I do not take this opportunity for granted. If you have not subscribed and you are watching and enjoying our videos, please subscribe. Thank you. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to draft a corset pattern with already made bra cups. If it's something you are interested in, then keep watching. On the screen are the measurements that I'm going to be using. So this is my pattern paper. I have folded it into two. See, I folded it into two. So you can either fold it into two or leave it as one, but I want to fold it into two so that I can open it up and put the bra cups on each opening. These are my bra cups. So I'm going to be using these bra cups to draw on my pattern. And this is the bra cups I'm going to be using for my corset top. The first thing I will do is to draw out a starting point. I always draw out starting points. So I'm going to rule a line and I will draw out my starting point. So this starting point is my shoulder line. This is my SL. So I'm going to label it shoulder line. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw out my vertical measurements. And my vertical measurements are measurements from my shoulder to my bust, shoulder to my under bust, and shoulder to my waist, which is going to be the full length of my top. So from my shoulder to my bust, my measurement is 12 inches. So I'll measure from the shoulder to the bust, which is 12 inches. I'll mark. And then I will draw a horizontal line across. I will then measure from my shoulder to my under bust. From my shoulder to my under bust, my measurement is 16 inches. I'll measure 16 inches to the under bust. 16 inches puts me here, and I'll mark. And then I'll draw a horizontal line across. This is my bust line. I'll label it, and this is my under bust line. And the next measurement is from my shoulder to my waist, and that measurement for me is 19 inches. I'll measure from the shoulder to the waist. I'll draw a horizontal line across. I will label this the waistline. So after drawing out all my vertical measurements, and then next thing we're going to do is I'm going to measure out my shoulder measurement. My shoulder measurement is 18 inches. By the time I divide that by 2, it's going to give me 9 inches. So I'll measure 9 inches on my shoulder line. And I will mark. 9 inches puts me here. I'll just put a mark there. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the neck width and neck depth. We'll use the standard measurement of 3 inches for the neck width and 3 inches for the neck depth. And then we'll create a curve. For this corset top, we do not need this part, but I will draft it so as to make it easier for beginners amongst us to understand. So I'm going to measure 3 inches by 3 inches. So this is my width, 3 inches, and then my depth, 3 inches. Then I'll create the curve. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out the shoulder slope because our shoulders are not straight. So I'll measure 1 inch down from the shoulder and I will mark. 1 inch down from this shoulder puts me here, and I will mark. And then I'll connect from this 1 inch to the width of the neck. From the 1 inch slope to the neck width. Like this. To create the armhole curve, for that we need our armhole measurement. Or you divide your bust circumference by 6 and then you add 1.5 inch and measure whatever you get from the shoulder slope down. My shoulder circumference measurement is 44 inches, and by the time I divide that by 6, it's going to give 7.33 inches. I will add 1.5, it's going to give me 8.833. I'm going to approximate that to 9 inches. So I'll measure 9 inches from the shoulder slope down. I will mark, and then I will connect with a straight line like this, and then I will draw this outwards. The This is my chest line or upper bust line. We will now create the armhole curve by finding the midpoint of our armhole line. I'm going to be using 9 inches because 9 inches is my line. So find out what yours is and then you use that. So 9 inches divided by 2 is going to give me 4.5 inches. I'm going to measure 4.5 inches and I'll put a mark there. That's the midpoint of my 9 inches. It's 4.5. And then I'm going to draw half an inch inwards from that midpoint, and that puts me here. I put a dot there, and this is going to create our armhole curve. We will now create our armhole curve from the shoulder slope to the chest line, and to do that we need our bust circumference measurement. So put in your calculated bust circumference measurement on the chest line or upper bust line. So mine is 44 inches, and by the time I divide that by 4, it's going to give me 11 inches. So I'm going to measure 11 inches from my center front, and I'll mark. So that's my point. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to connect from the shoulder to the midpoint, from the midpoint to the calculated bust circumference measurement, and that's going to give me my armhole curve. So I will connect like this all the way. You see? So that's my armhole curve. The next thing we're going to do is to plot our bust span measurement. Bust span is also known as nipple to nipple measurement. So my calculated nipple to nipple measurement is 4.5 inches. I'm going to measure that 4.5 inches on my under bust line and on my waistline. The reason why we're not plotting it here is because we need this space. This is where we're going to be placing our already made bra cup. So 4.5 inches puts me here. I'll mark. I'll do the same thing on my waistline. And then I'll draw a straight line to connect. So on the waistline, I will measure half an inch on each side of my bust span measurement because I want to create our darts. So on the waistline, I'm going to measure half an inch on each side. That's a total of 1 inch. So I will draw my darts. I will now plot in my circumference measurements and add back the dart taken. So we've already plotted circumference measurement for the bust on the chest line, which is this. So my circumference measurement for my under bust is 37 inches. And by the time I divide that by 4, it's going to give me 9.25 inches. So I'm going to measure 9.25 inches on my under bust line. 9.25 puts me here, I'll mark. And then on the waistline, my circumference measurement is 38 inches. And by the time I divide that by 4, it's going to give me 9.5 inches. So 9.5 puts me here and I mark. And then because we've taken 1 inch dart allowance from the waistline, I'm going to add it back. So that's 1 inch. I will add it back here. That's 1 inch. Okay, I'm going to connect it from the chest line to the under bust and from the under bust to the waistline. Don't forget we're taking in the dart. Once we take in the dart, that gap will close. You can smoothen out the sharp edges. So I'm going to add 1 inch to the side, and this is my sewing allowance. So I'm just going to indicate so that I'll remember what I did. 1 inch sewing allowance, that's SA. So the next thing I'm going to do after doing this, from the center front on the bust line, this is the bust line, I'm going to measure half an inch inwards. This is the space between the busts, and I will mark half an inch. Remember, it's folded. When I open it up, it's going to be 1 inch. So I'm going to measure half an inch and I'll mark. And I'll also do the same for the under bust line. I'll just draw dotted lines to connect the point. But when I place my bra cup, I know exactly where I'm starting from as dotted lines. I will now place my bra cup on my pattern. So I'm making sure that the edge of the cup is on the half. See this half inch that I went in? Edge is on there. So the edge is on that half an inch. So the cup is sitting underneath my under bust. It's touching this edge. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'll draw out the cup shape. This cup shape, I'm going to draw it out. And then I'm going to mark the edges outwards. Okay? So I'm just going to hold it in place and try to follow it. I'll mark this part outwards like this. And then this part outwards like this. And then I'm going to hold it and then I'll draw. So you see? So I'll mark this outwards, and then I will cover up the cup. So this is the bra cup. So this is where we're going to be cutting out. And when I place it back, see, just make sure it's sitting well under the bust. This is my front corset pattern using already made bra cups. I will now go ahead and cut this out. I'll cut out. When I'm transferring to fabric, I'm going to be adding hem allowance. I did not add any yet. I will add it on fabric. And here as well, I'm going to be adding sewing allowance when transferring to fabric. And I'm going to make a note of that. Add sewing allowance and add hemming allowance on fabric, you see? And then this one is add sewing allowance on fabric. So this is telling me what to do when I'm ready to cut out this pattern. So before I cut out this pattern, I'm going to extend my lines so that I can use this for the back. So I'm just going to add another pattern paper and then I will extend the lines. Once I extend the lines, I can now draw out the back. So I've extended the lines for the back. And this the extension so that by the time I cut out the front, it's easier to now just plot in the measurements for the back. So I'm going to cut out now. So after cutting out my front pattern, this is what I have. I can now place our breast cups. So this is what it looks like. The next thing we need to do now is to draft the back pattern. So the next thing we need to do now is to draft out the back pattern. I've already extended our lines. You know, for the back, this is the zipper allowance. I drew out 1 inch zipper allowance, 1 inch. This is just 1 inch. So the next thing you need to do, instead of doing all the armhole, do not need that. So we'll now use our front pattern. This is my front pattern. I'm just going to place it on it. So this is the waistline. I'll just place it on it. Then I will trace out. This is the top. So those are my markings. So I'll connect this top like this. This is the top. This is the circumference. See? Here. So I'm going to mark from here. So this is our allowance, okay? So I'm going to draw it out. And then this one as well, from here to here. And then here. So I'll connect them. And then from here to here. Just make sure your lines are not too sharp. You draw out your nipple to nipple. And then I'll draw a straight line to connect, like this. And then I'll measure 1/2 inch on each side and draw out the dart. So this is the back. See, by the time I place it, it's exactly the same, the dart and the sides. So this is my zipper allowance. So the next thing I need to do is to remove the bulge at the back of the zipper. To remove the bulge we usually see at the back, I'm going to measure 1/2 inch inwards. Let's assume this is one line and this is the second line for our zipper allowance. Remember, I drew out a 1 inch zipper allowance. From the first line, I'm going to go 1/2 inch inwards, 1/2 inch inwards, like this. And then I'll go on the second line and I'll measure 1/2 inch inwards as well. And then I'll connect from this to the top and from this to the top. And that's our new zipper allowance. And that will eliminate the bulge once we sew this top. This is our new zipper allowance. We don't need this anymore. So this is the new zipper allowance. So this is the back of our corset top. So the next thing I need to do now is to cut out this back pattern. So this is our back pattern. And this is the front pattern. For this front pattern, we're going to be cutting 1. And then for the back pattern, we're going to be cutting 2. Cut 2. So we're going to be using already made bra cups to sew this corset. I hope this tutorial was helpful. Please share, like, subscribe if you've not done so already. If you have any questions or suggestions, I will be in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Take care and God bless.